She said plenty of men want me. I did the unexpected. Story 1. I never imagined my life would unravel like this. It all started with a stupid, insignificant fight. One of those arguments that evaporates by morning, yet feels like the world's collapsing while it's happening. She was nagging, as usual, about some minor infraction. Maybe the garbage wasn't taken out, or I didn't answer my phone fast enough when she was out with friends. Nothing earth-shattering, just daily life. But lately, she'd been carrying a heavy load of frustration, and I was a convenient target. Then she said it. The words hung in the air like poison darts, sharper and colder than anything she'd said before. Plenty of men would want me. We'd weathered storms before, but this felt different. It wasn't just another argument. Something fundamental had shifted. I felt a rage bubbling in my chest, a bitter understanding that she wasn't just trying to wound me. There was a truth there, a truth I could no longer ignore. This wasn't the woman I married. I don't care about those men, I managed to choke out, my voice cracking. Was I angry? Humiliated? I wasn't sure. All I knew was I was tired, exhausted by something that seemed to be slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop it. The tension in the room thickened, my heart hammering like a trapped bird. My pulse throbbed in my ears, my fingertips tingling. I didn't know how to calm down, how to convince her I was doing my best, that I was trying to be there for her. But nothing was ever enough. She didn't back down, either. In fact, she seemed almost pleased, as if she'd won some unspoken competition. Oh? I know you don't care, but maybe you should. Maybe then you'd actually start doing something right for once. Her words were coded in something I couldn't quite decipher: resentment, regret, a twisted sense of triumph, as if she'd finally found the key to breaking me. My throat tightened, the words catching there. Was I fighting to save the woman I thought I knew? Or just a ghost of her? The ideal I'd been clinging to for years. She looked away, arms crossed, her face unreadable. A chasm opened up, not just between our bodies, but in the way she looked at me. Her eyes held no warmth, no connection, as if I were a stranger. I wanted to shout, to declare that I didn't deserve this, that I'd been patient, present, always there for her, and she hadn't even noticed. But what was the point? She'd already checked out. I could see it in her posture, the way she avoided eye contact. It was like she'd already made a decision. Something inside me snapped. Maybe there were plenty of men out there who wanted her, who could give her what I couldn't, but I wasn't going to beg for scraps of affection. So? I left. It wasn't dramatic, no slammed doors, no screaming matches, no tearful goodbyes. I didn't even pack a bag. I just grabbed my jacket and walked out the door. Maybe I should have felt more. Anger, sadness, confusion. But all I felt was a strange, numb clarity. This wasn't working. She wasn't working. And I wasn't working for her anymore. I didn't know where I was going. I just couldn't stay there. Not after what she'd said. It wasn't like I hadn't thought about leaving before, but this time it was different. This time, there was no going back. I didn't go to a friend's house, didn't call anyone to explain. I just drove. The miles blurred by, as if the world was dragging me away from everything. Away from the mess I'd made of my life. The silence in the car was a shield, broken only by the hum of the tires and the frantic beat of my own heart. I ended up at a bar, alone. Not a fancy place, just a dive with the smell of stale beer and fried food. But I didn't care. I ordered a drink, leaned against the counter, and felt the cheap whiskey burn down my throat, as if it was washing something away. It was the first time in months I'd felt something, anything. The bartender gave me a knowing look, but I ignored it. I didn't want sympathy, didn't want explanations. Then the door opened. Someone walked in, and my eyes met theirs for a fleeting moment. Not the look of pity, not the look of judgment, but something else, maybe just curiosity. Maybe something more. I didn't know, and for a moment, I didn't care. I just knew they weren't seeing me the way she did. For now, that was all it seemed I needed. Then, a voice shattered the fragile calm. A stranger, a few stools down, said, "She said she'd leave you." My blood ran cold. What the hell? I turned slowly, trying to understand how the stranger's words could feel like a physical blow. He sat nursing a drink, his gaze occasionally flicking to mine. "She said she'd leave you," he repeated, almost casually, as if we were already in the middle of a conversation. My heart lurched, my mind racing to catch up. Was he talking about my wife? How could he possibly know? Had she told someone? Been confiding in others? I couldn't speak, just stared at him, trying to decide if I should walk away or demand an explanation. "Who the hell are you?" I finally managed, my voice colder than I intended. I wasn't looking for a fight, but I couldn't control myself. This guy knew something, and it made my stomach churn. He just shrugged as if the answer was obvious. "She didn't think you'd leave. Thought you'd just stick around, put up with whatever she threw at you." My mind reeled. He was talking about my life like he knew everything. What did he know? What had she told him? I gripped the bar, trying to steady myself. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice a little calmer now, but the anxiety tightening its grip. He took a slow sip of his drink, acting like we were just having a casual chat. "She came in here a few weeks ago with someone else." The words hit me like a physical blow. Every doubt, every suspicion I'd ever had flashed through my mind. "What do you mean, with someone else?" His eyes shifted to mine, sharp and knowing. "I mean, she came in here with another guy. They were pretty cozy. Didn't even notice me watching. Guess she thought I was just another regular." Nausea rose in my throat. I'd never had concrete proof of her infidelity before, but hearing it from a stranger, someone who seemed so sure, felt like a crushing weight. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to tell him he was wrong. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself leaning forward, elbows on the bar, as if being closer would somehow make it less real. "You're sure?" My voice was barely a whisper, pleading. I hated myself for asking, but I had to know. He leaned back, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Oh yeah," laughing, touching his arm, getting pretty close. Didn't even care who saw. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, my whole body on fire. But it wasn't anger I felt, it was a deep, gnawing hollowness. As if someone had carved out a part of me I didn't even know existed. What was worse, the possibility that she'd been with someone else, or the fact that she hadn't even bothered to hide it. "I don't think she cares much about you anymore," the stranger said, almost dismissively, as if he was just offering some general observation. He gave me a look that made me feel exposed, as if he knew secrets I didn't want to admit to myself. I didn't know what to say. I could feel myself unraveling, piece by piece. Everything she'd said, the things I'd dismissed or attributed to stress. Had it all been leading up to this? Was this the moment when everything I thought I knew about my life, my relationship, shattered into a million pieces? I stared at the man, desperately hoping for some kind of answer, some kind of closure. But he offered nothing. He just finished his drink as if this wasn't a monumental event in my life. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just lived. I barely remember the walk to my car, the cold air stinging my face, the engine roaring to life. It was like everything had changed in an instant. Like the world was no longer a place where I could simply coast along, assuming everything was okay. As I drove into the night, my mind raced with doubts and possibilities. Was I running from her? Or just running from the crushing weight of betrayal? I pulled into a parking lot, somewhere I didn't recognize. The silence of the night pressed in around me, broken only by the hum of the engine. I stared out the windshield, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. But something else was gnawing at me now, something I hadn't considered in the heat of the moment. What if I wasn't the only one who'd left? What if she'd been waiting for me to leave, so she could finally make her own choices? I wasn't sure I wanted to find out, but I knew I had to. I spent the next 3 days in a daze, mostly driving around, trying to clear my head. But the questions wouldn't stop. Every street reminded me of her, of everything we built, and everything that was crumbling around me. My phone rang several times, but I didn't have the energy to answer. I didn't want to hear from her. Not yet. Not while everything was still so raw. Then came the text. A simple message, but it felt like a bomb exploding in my lap. "We need to talk." I stared at the words on the screen, my hand trembling. I didn't know what she wanted to say, but I could feel the storm brewing inside me again. I didn't want to talk. Not yet. Not while everything was still so uncertain. But I couldn't ignore it. I needed to know where we stood. I replied simply, "I'll be there." When I arrived at the house, it was eerily silent. The front door was slightly ajar, the silence seeming almost ominous. She sat at the kitchen table, her hands folded together. She looked smaller than I remembered. When she saw me, her eyes were a mix of emotions, guilt perhaps, or fear. I couldn't tell. But there was something else there, something I couldn't quite name. She didn't look at me the way she used to, the way I expected her to. Her gaze was distant, detached. "I owe you an explanation," she said, breaking the silence, her voice soft but strained. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You owe me more than that." The words came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't care. I needed answers, I needed something to make sense of the chaos. She didn't react to my tone. Instead, she sighed and looked down at her hands. I never meant for things to get this bad. But things weren't right. I didn't know how to fix it. And maybe I wasn't even trying anymore. I just stared at her, my mind reeling. She wasn't even trying. That's what it came down to. I'd ignored all the subtle signs, all the times I should have asked questions. I'd been too busy pretending that everything could be fixed, that we could go back to the way things used to be. She took a deep breath. For a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. Instead, she continued, "I didn't want to hurt you. I thought if I pushed you far enough, you'd be the one to walk away. It would have been easier that way, right? But you didn't. You stuck around. And I kept pushing. And then when I met someone else I don't know, it felt like I was already done before it even started. My head spun. Someone else. The word struck me harder than I expected. It wasn't just the argument, or her coldness. She'd actually been with someone else. What the hell are you talking about? I finally choked out, my hands clenching into fists. You think you can just go out and do whatever you want, and I wouldn't notice? You think I'm living in a fantasy world? She looked up at me, her eyes filled with something like regret. I never wanted to hurt you, but I wasn't happy, and I didn't know how to tell you that. I didn't know how. The silence stretched between us, a chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. All those years, all those shared moments, it felt like they were all a lie. So here we are, she stated. Strangers. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. So what now? You just expect me to walk back into this like nothing happened? I shook my head, my frustration finally erupting. You think I'd just forget that you shut me out? And then come crawling back? I'm sorry, she whispered, her face crumpling. But she didn't reach out, didn't move. I stepped back, running a hand through my hair, trying to think, trying to breathe. You were right about one thing, I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. I did leave. You wanted me to go. And I did. But not for the reasons you think. A frown creased her forehead. What do you mean? A bitter laugh bubbled in my chest, but I swallowed it down. I left because I finally saw. I saw that you don't see me anymore. I'm just someone you're stuck with, someone who will always be here, no matter how much you push. You made me feel small, and then you decided that wasn't enough, so you found someone else. Her voice was barely audible now. It wasn't like that. It was a mistake. You don't just make a mistake like that. You make choices. You make decisions. And you chose him. The silence that followed was suffocating. Neither of us knew what to say next because the truth was out, hanging in the air, heavy and undeniable. She betrayed me, and I had to decide. Could I live with that? Could I even try to rebuild what we'd had? Or was it simply too far gone? I turned towards the door, my body heavy, my heart shattered. But something inside me felt stronger, more grounded than it had in months. I can't do this anymore. I whispered. I'm done. I walked out the door without another word. I didn't look back. And as I drove away, the weight on my chest slowly began to lift, little by little. The road ahead was uncertain, terrifying. But for the first time in a long time, I was making my own decision. And maybe that was all I needed. Story 2. My 10th wedding anniversary should have been a celebration of love and commitment. Instead, it became a bizarre nightmare fueled by my sister-in-law's friend, Amanda. From the moment she walked in, I knew something was wrong. She practically slinked towards my husband, who was greeting guests, giving me the smug, knowing smirk. I tried to ignore it, but she was relentless, laughing way too hard at his jokes, giving him sultry glances from the corner of her eye. It was all so calculated, so obvious. Later that night, after most of the guests had left, my husband and I were finally relaxing on the couch when Amanda appeared out of nowhere. A sly smirk plastered on her face. She started making these snide, underhanded comments about our marriage, trying to get a rise out of him. But he didn't take the bait. He stood firm, telling her he was happily married and not interested in her advances. She finally got the message and left, but the damage was done. I felt violated, disgusted by her behavior. But I also felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for my husband's unwavering loyalty. We talked about what had happened, promising to always be open and honest with each other. It was a painful night, but it ultimately brought us closer. The next day, I decided to talk to my sister-in-law about Amanda's outrageous behavior. I wanted her to understand how uncomfortable it had made both my husband and me, especially since Amanda was her best friend. I approached her gently, wanting to avoid unnecessary drama. She was shocked and apologized profusely. She had no idea Amanda had acted that way and promised to talk to her and set things straight. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, which made me feel a lot better. My sister-in-law called me to tell me about her talk with Amanda. She said she confronted her friend about her actions at our anniversary party, and Amanda was initially defensive but eventually apologized. My sister-in-law was furious with Amanda for putting me, and my husband, in such an uncomfortable situation. She told me that she had made it clear to Amanda that her behavior was unacceptable, and that she would not tolerate any disrespect towards her family. I could hear the anger in her voice, but I appreciated her support and loyalty. She assured me that Amanda had been properly reprimanded and would keep her distance from me and my husband in the future. As much as I appreciated my sister-in-law's response, I still felt uneasy about the whole situation. Amanda had been her close friend for years, and I knew their relationship would likely never be the same. But at the end of the day, Amanda had to face the consequences of her actions, It was a hard lesson learned. Then, a few weeks after the incident, I received a text from Amanda. At first, I thought it was going to be a sincere apology. I was so wrong. She said I should be grateful that she expressed an interest in him. My husband was livid and I was furious. My husband has made it clear he would not tolerate that kind of behavior. Amanda's jealousy and bitterness were on full display, and it was clear that she was coming from a place of deep insecurity and pain. I replied to Amanda with a mixture of strength and compassion. Amanda's actions ultimately strengthened my relationship with my husband. Even when faced with temptation, he remained faithful and true to me. Story 3. I'm living the aftermath of a decision that scarred my children, a decision involving a wild bunny. I am no longer with the woman who made this decision, as she committed the unforgivable. She cheated. Here's a condensed recap. A few months ago, my kids found a baby bunny. We decided to release it near our property. I told my wife to release it into the bushes at the edge of our property. She released it in the middle of our yard, where it was swiftly snatched up by a hawk as my children watched in horror. My kids then became upset with my wife. As I tried to support my kids, I tried to tell my wife to see where they are coming from. That's the background to what has gone down now. This story isn't about a bunny being taken by a hawk. It's about betrayal. This happened a few months ago. I caught her affair on nanny cam. I installed it because I was suspicious that she may be having an affair. It caught her and a younger colleague talking about plans for the future, which included my kids not being included. She then served me divorce papers. I found out I was in a false state. Since she planned an affair, it was automatically going to be in my favor. This means that the divorce was now in my favor and I got full custody of my children. So, I got the divorce and the house. She got the settlement and also had a baby with him. That's where that part of the story ends. I am now a free man, living my best life with my kids. Story 4. I thought my marriage was solid. For years a life plan laid out, everything seemed to be going well. Then we discovered I was infertile. It was a punch to the gut. Our entire future seemed to dissolve. She seemed supportive at first, but there was something off about it. Too quick to accept, too little emotion. Suddenly, I felt her pulling away, making little jabs at me, finding fault where there was none before. When I asked about it, she dismissed it as my imagination. But I knew something was wrong. Years passed and we were barely coexisting. I tried to talk about adoption or surrogacy, but she shut it down. I tried to connect with her, but was rejected. One day, she tells me she wanted to go on a vacation with her friends. Of course she could. I took her to the airport and trusted that everything was in order. The first few days go by, then I realized she hadn't actually gone with her friends. She lied and was nowhere to be seen. It turned out it was a lie. Her friends didn't see her on vacation. They live in the same town that we do. It was planned for her to leave and I was a fool. It felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Her family was just as shocked as I was. I didn't know what else to do but seek help. I talked to a therapist and learned the truth. The therapist let me realize something I had not been able to accept. If she really wanted to stay, she would have. It was not my fault. And that's when I decided I must let her go. I found new hobbies, new friends, and new passion. I was no longer defined as just being her husband. And then one day she comes back, holding her child. She wanted us to be a family, and I said no. That was her mistake to make. The next few days her parents tried to help me out and tried to ask me for money, because she was struggling. And I also said no. I knew that whatever I was doing was going to come out to a good ending. Story 5. I'm Alex, an electrician. A few months ago, I had a solid life, a wife, a business, a house. But it was all built on a lie. My wife, Jessica, became obsessed with her career, constantly talking about her new mentor, Mike. She started working late, dressing differently, going to the gym at odd hours. I ignored the signs to focus on building my business. Then I found the evidence, a hotel key card, credit card statements with suspicious charges. I used a keylogger to access her email, and that's when I discovered the truth. Jessica and Mike were planning their escape, talking about their future together, while I was busting my ass to provide for them. They were going to move out, get a divorce, and live the high life that she deserved. I'm not the type to lose control. I hired a lawyer and started making plans. I secured my business, opened a new bank account, and transferred half our savings, leaving her exactly half above board. I even sent all the evidence to Mike's pregnant wife. Then I told my wife that I may have to go out of town. That day came and I packed, drove around the block, then circled back. I was going to see her in the act. To my shock, I saw her leaving. I ran into the house, and there was a note. She left me. She left me a message saying she was with someone else. All those years gone. This began a whole other journey. I called my lawyer, who got everything in order. We got to the conclusion of the matter. And now I am living my best life, and I am starting to befriend another electrician I work with. She's my true match. And Jessica and Michael are both out of work. It was all for nothing. Story 6. I was engaged to a wonderful man, but his mother hated me. I didn't fit her idea of a perfect daughter-in-law because I was white. She wouldn't speak to me, made snide comments in her native language, and generally made me feel like an outsider. I always tried to be respectful. I spent a lot of time studying her language to surprise my fiancé and be able to talk to her. All I discovered was she did not like me and insulted me in the most brutal way. I was going to get her back for everything. That's when I decided to publicly humiliate her at the wedding. I began my speech and thanked my father and other family in her language. As I approached her, I told her how much of a terrible person she was. It was embarrassing and glorious. I felt like I got my victory. It worked out that she felt so guilty that she actually apologized, and is now one of the best grandmothers to my babies. Do you think I handled it the right way? What would you have done in my situation? Given what you have heard, I value your perspectives and would love to hear your thoughts on this complex family dynamic, especially considering the cultural aspects and the long-term consequences of the approach I took. What alternatives might have been more constructive? Or do you believe that, given the circumstances, my actions were justified? Your feedback will help me reflect on the situation and learn from it, so please don't hold back.